Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at game number 1 of the final classical chess match that I'm playing here in Weissenhaus, Germany, in the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. Now, the match I'm playing after my huge win against Gukesh is against Nodirbek Abdussatorov from Uzbekistan, and it's once again a best-of-2 match. If we are tied at 1-1 after 2 games, there will be tiebreaks. Alright, so we start by playing position number 866. Now, the reason I mentioned the position number is that this is the first position that I played where the preparation that I did with Fabiano and Magnus before the game did not come to fruition, but also the first game where I did not play a symmetrical opening. So, prior to the game, Fabiano, Magnus, and I were all expecting to move c4 as white hits the pawn on h7. Let's say you play a6, for example. After queen takes h7, it's already uh-oh spaghetti-o time. If you move this horse, you lose this one. You move this horse, you lose this one. So you're going to lose one of these knights. So, c4 is the move that I was expecting, but then both Yavokir Sindarov and Nodirbek Abdussatorov respectively played e4 instead. Now, I did see that Magnus Carlsen, who was playing against Sindarov in the match for 3rd and 4th place, opened with the move e5. Now, my gut instinct when I saw Magnus play e5 was that I had a feeling this was a very dangerous position with white bringing out these knights very, very quickly. There's even bishop c4 to hit the f7 pawn, and it looks very dangerous. So, after e4, I spent quite a bit of time, and ultimately I decided to play the move c5, essaying the classic Sicilian defense. Now, when I go c5 here, I am hitting the pawn on h2 right away, but also it makes me feel really, really good to know that apparently e4 is an inaccuracy, specifically because of the Sicilian defense, and already after move number 1, I'm simply better according to the chess.com engine. So I play c5. We get the move knight f3 from Nodirbek, and now I play the move e6, and here we get the move b3, opening up the long diagonal. Now, this position, I played the move knight f6, and this is a move that I played because I really was looking to imbalance the game very early. Now, the other option was to play something like knight g6 here, or maybe f6 right away. I thought the position was okay, but I wanted to try and create imbalance instantly. So I go knight f6. Nodirbek plays move e5, and now I play the move knight to h5. Now, after knight to h5, we get the move c4, and here I play this move f5. It's already a very chaotic position. White's knight on h1 is not very well placed, and what I'm really hoping for is to play b6 and open up the diagonal, but also maybe to jump with the knight to the center. So here Nodirbek takes the pawn. This, of course, is a classic end peasant maneuver where white captures the pawn on f6. I play knight takes pawn, and now we get this move knight to g3. Now, I was really unsure what was going on here. Nodirbek could have decided to take my knight and then win a pawn on h7 here, but after queen h7 and bishop to d6, I have the 2 b's, and down the road, let's say we get knight g3, for example. After b6, I have the 2 b's on open diagonals. I can castle my king to the queen side, and it's anybody's guess who is better. Now, it's worth pointing out that after the win yesterday, I really wanted to try and be creative today, and in one of those games against Gukesh, I think I mentioned the line, the computer was happy to sacrifice pawns so long as you would get the bishop pair, and I really was trying to incorporate that into my game today. So after knight takes f6, we get knight g3, and now I play the move b6 here, opening up the diagonal, and here Nodirbek plays move bishop d3. Now I take the knight on f3, and I follow it up with this move queen f4. Another concept that I've seen a lot in analysis as well as games that I've played here is that very oftentimes when you have a queen on b8 or a8, you're trying to swing the queen into the action very, very quickly on the diagonals. I think in yesterday's game, there was a moment where there was a queen c2 and queen a5 like I did against Gukesh. Actually, Nodirbek, I think, also did this. So I was already familiar with the idea of bringing the queen out. And even though I'm giving up the 2 b's here, my queen is active. White has these passive pawns on f2 and f3. And already here, I thought it was completely fine. The other theme that you guys probably have noticed in a lot of my Fischer random games so far is that I am giving my opponents the B's or the bishop pair. Now, I think in regular chess, the bishop pair is very powerful, but in Fischer random, due to the random assortment of the setup of the pieces on the back rank, I think some of the players are overestimating the value of the bishop pair. So Nodirbek plays move bishop takes pawn. I take on f3, we get rook e2, and now I play the move bishop to d6, potentially trying to trade the bishop for the knight and winning this rook on e2. Nodirbek plays queen d3, I trade the queens, and now I play the move knight f7. Now here we're in an endgame where white has 2 bishops versus a bishop and a knight, but due to these split pawns on f2 and h2, honestly here, I thought the position was close to equal. So we get the move h4. Now here I play the move king c7, we get bishop g6, and now I play the move rook f8, and Nodirbek decides to castle his king on move number 16. Now another theme is that I had the game against Gukesh earlier in the tournament where I played the move king to c2 instead of castling. I wasn't really sure if I should castle or go king c7, so I just decided to put the king on c7. So we get this position after rook f8, Nodirbek castles, and here I play the move bishop f4, and this is apparently the first step in the wrong direction. Now the other move that I considered was the move knight to d8 here. The idea is that, let's just say white goes h5. If I get knight c6, suddenly there's this potential to create a connect 4 with the knight on d4, combined with the weak pawn on f2, and black is doing very well. Ultimately, I rejected this idea because I thought after the move d4, takes, knight c6, and something like bishop b2, I figure the two b's are open on the diagonals. White can maybe even play on the d file, and already here I thought that white might even have the advantage. Now, I also apparently can't draw arrows at the moment. So, in this position after bishop g6, I go rook f8. We now get this move castles, and here I play the move bishop f4, trying to stop white from playing d4. So I go bishop f4. Nodirbek plays king c2, and this is a move which I think is a slight inaccuracy. I thought that Nodirbek should have played king b1, because now if I play knight h8 similar to the game, Nodirbek can go bishop to c2 and follow it up with d4 on the next turn. So we get king c2, knight h8, bishop d3, knight f7, and now Nodirbek goes back to g6. I play knight h8, and here he decides to go bishop e4. Now, it's abundantly clear to me that Nodirbek wanted to play this game. He was not happy to simply make a draw. Frankly, I think both of us were kind of hoping this game would go on, and we both get our wish with bishop e4. Now, the reason bishop d3 is not great here, if white doesn't repeat, is that with the bishop on d3, white cannot push the pawn to d4, and therefore black is fine. So we get bishop e4. Now I play this move e5 here, and my idea is very simple. I want to put this bishop in jail on this diagonal where the bishop simply will have no scope. Nodirbek plays rook g1, and I go d6, and now we get the move bishop to h1. Now in this position, you'll notice the bishop on a1 is very, very passive. It's walled off by these pawns on d6 and e5. That being said, however, it's still very equal. So here I decide to play the move bishop takes knight, and this is a move that's very, very committal. It's a move that I wasn't sure if I should play, but ultimately my view was that white has the two b's here, but if you look at the diagonals, this diagonal is completely open. The bishop can't attack anything here, and the other bishop is on a closed diagonal, so there simply is no scope at all. So I take, Nodirbek of course captures with the pawn to correct his pawn structure. If you go rook g3, now I get knight to h5, rook g5, and g6, and with the move knight to f4 coming here, black should be a little bit better as I have an outpost for the knight, and I can start to gang up on the f pawn on f2. So Nodirbek takes, and now I go knight g4. What I'm trying to do is prevent white from pushing these pawns up the board. We get bishop c3, I go knight f7, b4, and now I play the move knight to h6. Now here, this knight on g4 stops white from really pushing the pawns up the board, but also I can try to jump to f5 and potentially d4 with a classic diamond hands formation in the center of the board. Nodirbek trades, goes rook b1, and now I have to play rook b8. If I play a move like knight to f5, we get rook b7 check, classic kebab on the 7th rank, and now white is close to winning. So I go rook to b8, stopping white from playing rook to b7, and now Nodirbek plays move rook e1. Here I go knight to f5, trying to target the pawns on g3 and h4, but also spying this d4 square as well. Nodirbek trades the rooks, and now he plays move bishop g2. Now, I will confess that when this line happened, I did not actually see the power of this bishop g2 move. I didn't even realize it was possible. And the reason it's actually already getting a little bit tricky to play for black is that if I take what looks like a free pawn, white has bishop to a5, checking the king. And when I move the king, doesn't matter d7 or c8, white has bishop h3, pinning the knight and simply winning the game. So I actually have to be a little bit careful here. Fortunately, I kept my nerve about me, and I play this move knight g to h6. Nodirbek goes rook g1 here, an important move, and now I play g6. Now I cannot take the pawn once again, because white will go for the same idea with bishop to a5 check, king d7, and now bishop h3, checking the king, attacking the rook, and after knight f5, rook takes g7, king e6. White can probably even play rook takes a7. White has wide peepos on both sides of the board. The two b's are very, very active now, and white should win the game. So I play this move g6 here. The reasoning behind this is I want to stop white from being able to play h5. I also reinforce my knight on f5 here. Once again, I can't draw my arrows. So I reinforce this knight on f5. I stop white from playing h5, and all the while, I still target the pawns on g3 and h4. So Nodirbek plays the move bishop to h3, and now I go king d7. My idea is simple. Run this king over to the king side, keep the rook on the b file so that white can never infiltrate, and hopefully I'll be able to save the game. So we get king d3. I play king e7, and now Nodirbek plays the move a4, and here I go knight g7. Now, what's happened here is that Nodirbek is struggling to come up with a concrete plan in this position. The bishop on c3 is still a very, very passive piece. It has no scope whatsoever. In an ideal world, what you would love to get is something like this, for example, where now the bishop can come to g5, and with the two diagonals, white has decent chances. Ultimately, Nodirbek doesn't have that. So when I go knight g7 here, this bishop is still very passive on c3. The pawns dominate the bishop, and I'm trying to put these knights on f5 and h5 to go after these pawns on the king side. Nodirbek plays the move bishop g2, and this is the first sign that Nodirbek is being a little bit too optimistic. I think that when he played this move, he was looking for counterplay, trying to win this game, and so he decides to sacrifice a pawn. So I go knight f5, targeting the pawn, and now he plays the move a5. Now, if white were to play the move bishop to e4, for example, after knight to h5, suddenly these knights are targeting the pawns on g3 and h4 here, and white actually has to be very careful. If white plays g4, trying to force the knights, I check, knight f4, and after king c2, knight takes h4, I am up a pawn on the king side. That being said, due to the bad placement of this knight on h4 here, where it can't easily jump back into the game because of this bishop, white is actually doing quite well. So Nodirbek plays the move a5, I take the pawn, he goes bishop c6, I play knight f5, and now he plays the move a6. Now what Nodirbek is doing is he's going all in on one idea. His idea is to put the bishop on b7, and then play bishop to a5, followed by bishop b6. If I take, he gets a7 and a8 queen. So Nodirbek is going all in on this queenside idea. He's not really worried about the king side here, and thematically this is quite bad, but it is still a very tricky position to play for black. So here I play the move knight to h5, and this was a move that was based on a miscalculation. Now what I probably should have played here was the move rook to b6, and after bishop to b7 here, I can very calmly play the move king to f6, because if white ever tries to go bishop a5, after rook b3, king c2, I have knight to d4 check. If you go this way, I check with knight e2, followed by rook to b1 checkmate with these knights and the rook, and if white goes king d1 right away, same thing with rook b1. Now, obviously with a computer, much easier to see. I did consider this briefly, but ultimately when I played knight h5, there's a reason I did this, and it was based on a miscalculation, which is that after bishop b7 and knight to f4, now Nodirbek played the move king to e4. Now the move that I was expecting was the move king to c4, king to c2, and in this position, after knight takes h4, I thought I was up 2 pawns and cleanly winning the game. But instead, Nodirbek goes king to e4, and now I realize that if I try to play the move knight takes h4 here, white can go bishop a5, let's just say knight f5, for example, and after bishop b6, white is actually getting through on the queen side. I can always sack the rook for this pawn, but at the end of the day, in this position, white should be able to draw the game. So I end up playing this move king to f6, Nodirbek plays bishop a5, and now I play the move rook h8 targeting the pawn. Now one important thing about my moves here, and one thing that I was very cognizant of while I was playing this game, is that I have had a lot of struggles when I've been really low on time, so I'm trying to play a little bit quicker, just try not to get too low on time, and keep the pressure going. So we get rook g4, I play the move knight e6, and now Nodirbek plays the move king d5. And even though you'll see the evaluation bar giving black a big advantage, it's very tricky because white always has this bishop b6 idea. This king can potentially run to c6 and c7 down the road, so it's just not an easy position to play. So I go rook h7, Nodirbek plays king c6, and I will point out, as soon as I play this move rook h7, I realized to my horror that here Nodirbek could have sacked the rook with rook takes pawn, and after takes, check, king d5 and e4, white can go king c6, and with this idea of bishop b6 once again, white is actually saving the game. Fortunately for me, Nodirbek plays move king c6, I play check, king d5, and now I play this move knight c2. Now again, I could have played knight e6 trying to call Nodirbek's bluff, but I was actually worried that he would see this move rook takes g6 on the next attempt. So I go knight c2 here, and my idea is to play knight to b4, try to target this pawn on a6 permanently, but also stop white from ever going bishop b6. So we get king e4, I play the move knight b4, Nodirbek checks, king f7, and now he plays the move bishop c7. Now in this position, if Nodirbek had played the move bishop to d5 after king to e8, and rook takes g6, white probably will save the game at this point. And if I take the bishop here after king takes d5, it's anybody's guess what is happening. This white king is running very close to this pawn on a7. I have the weak pawn on g6, and I think that probably there's a good chance I could lose this position. Luckily, Nodirbek plays bishop c7. Now I go rook to h8, stopping any bishop d8 ideas, and here we get the move bishop a5. Now I play king f6, we get bishop c7, and here I play the move king f7, and Nodirbek finds the move bishop d5. I go king g7, we get bishop b7 back, guarding the pawn on a6, and now I play the move king f6. Now once again, in this position, I have one extra pawn, but it is still very, very tricky to convert this position because I don't have an obvious idea. Nodirbek goes king f3, and now I spot this move king to e7. Now, prior to king f3, I assumed I was much better here, but I wasn't actually sure where the clean win was. But one important thing that I realized when I got the knight to b4 is that if white ever plays bishop b6 here, I don't have to take the bishop allowing a7. I can simply sack the horse for the pawn. If white takes my horse, I capture this bishop. If you take this pawn after knight b4, now without the a pawns on the board, these knights are simply better than the bishops. So Nodirbek goes king f3, and now I play the move king to e7. An important move here, as now white cannot capture the pawn on g6 due to knight takes h4, forking the king and the rook. So here we get the move king to e2, king to e7, Nodirbek plays bishop a5, and now I play this move knight c6. Nodirbek plays bishop c3, and here I go knight ce7, and at this point, for the first time in the game, I can truly relax because I know that I have achieved a technically winning position. I'm still up a pawn in the center of the board, but this h-pawn is going to fall. These knights are both guarding this pawn on g6 and targeting the pawn on h4, and white's ideas with bishop a5, b6 are simply no longer effective. So Nodirbek plays d3 here. Now, after the move d3, I play rook takes pawn, Nodirbek trades, and here he goes bishop d2. Now, let's not forget that very early in the tournament, my first classical game, I actually had an endgame against Sindarov where it was a rook and two bishops versus a rook and two knights. Ultimately, it went into a bishop versus knight endgame, which would be a draw. Should have won that game. And I also had that against Gukesh as well with bishops versus knights. So, luckily in this one, I'm up 2 pawns here. I have an extra G pawn, extra E pawn. As long as white cannot get after this A7 pawn with a bishop A5, B6, I win the game. So here I go knight C6, trying to lock this bishop on B7 out of the game. The bishop simply has no scope whatsoever. So now we play a game of this knight versus this bishop, since both these pieces don't move. So here Nodirbek plays bishop E1, I go knight G2, bishop D2, knight F4, and now we get the move king E3. If Nodirbek were to trade the bishop for the knight and run after the king-side pawns here, I simply very coolly wait in this position. If white ever takes the pawn, I go f3, f2, f1, as this bishop cannot get back into the game. And if white plays a move like bishop to a8, there are many ways to win, but probably cleanest to go here, bishop b7, and knight e5 takes an f3, f2 to win the pawn on d3 and the pawn on a6 as well, because the bishop will get distracted by the f-pawn. So Nodirbek plays king e3, and now I play the move knight b4, and in this position, Nodirbek Abdussatorov resigns the game. I have a very nice formation with these pawns connecting and holding the juicers on f4 and b4. These knights are going to lead to me winning one of the pawns, either on d3 or a6. Say white goes here to guard. I take this pawn, and I put my knight back, and then I start pushing p on the queen side to win the game. If Nodirbek were to play a move like king to e4, I simply take with the knight, and then I run this knight back to f4, walk the king over to b6, win the pawn on a6, and I simply have too much p. So, I get a very, very big win in the first game of the final match, playing for 5th and 6th place against Nodirbek Abdussatorov from Uzbekistan. In general, it's really nice to finally win a game in the classical portion. I've had a couple of opportunities which I've let slip through my fingers thus far, but to get a win in the first game is really good, because now it means that tomorrow I will play with the white pieces, and unless I lose the classical game, I will finish in 5th place. Now, obviously, it's not what I was hoping for overall in terms of the standings, but nonetheless, you have to make do with what you have. And even though I had the heartbreaking loss in the first match against Sindarov, I won against Gukesh, and I'm on the cusp of winning against Nodirbek as well. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the final match I'm playing here for 5th and 6th place against Nodirbek Abdussatorov from Uzbekistan. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap tomorrow after my final classical game and potentially tiebreakers here in the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour being held in Weissenhaus, Germany. See you guys soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your evening. Auf Wiedersehen. Bye.